We wait, and we go live. Greetings and salutations, viewers and listeners. Welcome to episode 109 of Word Ninjas Live. I am your regular host, Charles, coming to you tonight with our co-hosts, Will.
Hello.
Justin.
Hello.
And Calvin.
Hello. I was trying to come up with something witty. I couldn't. I can't really. I've been having trouble coming up with much of anything this week.
That's what this weekend is for. We can refresh our creative juices.
Something to that extent.
Preferably in a PG-13 manner, though.
No promises.
Alright, tonight we are coming to you with, oh, that's not my show notes, that's a map. Where are my show notes? There are my show notes. Coming to you tonight with a talking point about formatting. Because not everyone necessarily writes non-fiction novels. Or fiction novels. Or both. I don't know. Let's see. What resources are there for content formatting? And what formatting have you used in your creative works? Primarily, we're talking about novels, scripts, screenplays, poems, mostly literary works, but we can adapt it as necessary, as can our viewers and listeners for their respective creative endeavors. This was a question brought up a good while ago now. It was in the queue, but mainly trying to focus on what sort of software is out there for formatting novels, or formatting a script, or basically what formats are expected for certain literary endeavors. I know we kind of broke it down primarily into novel-length pieces, poetry, and then scripts. Those seem to be the three primary ways you can break stuff down, and novels can be changed into different lengths, from novel to novelette to short story to flash fiction, and everything in between. But scripts can also count for TV, movie, stage, video game, because, hey, that's a thing, and even we're working on that. Manga, because that's also a thing some of us are working on, and there are scripts involved. And anything else that we come up with. Now, most people who are going to be working on these, chances are going to be using hardware of some sort, usually a computer or laptop, maybe a tablet or phone, depending on where you need to be working on this. But the main stuff that I tend to use is Microsoft Office, just because it's so prevalent and the file formats are so widely used across the industry. Yes, there are free software options out there, like I want to say OpenOffice. There's others that I'm blanking on now, even though I've used them, that you can transfer into Microsoft Word template or file formats. And then there's stuff like Text Wrangler or Notepad++, just for basic text writing, but still you're going to want to format it into something a little more widely used and acknowledged at some point. If you're sharing it across multiple people, like, hey, what we do, Google Docs is your friend. Stuff like Evernote is hit or miss depending on how active multiple people need to be in regards to editing at the same time. We've learned that the hard way. And those are the main ones that came to the top of my head. I'm curious if anyone else has others they would like to toss in regards to like what software they would use for writing a novel or formatting a novel or lengthy piece, as it were. Or am I just going to get silent stares?
I've mostly been using Google Docs to do all my writing in lately. I don't really have any super fancy formatting that I use for it. Standard half-inch indents, single space, uh, inch borders on the side.
Everything in Comic Sans.
Oh God, no. I think Roommate is in Times New Roman, but I think Google Docs defaults to Arial. So if I start something new, it'll be in Arial, but I started writing Roommate in Microsoft Word, which defaulted, I don't know if it still does, but it used to default to Times New Roman. And then when I imported it over, it kept that formatting. But other than that, I'm not super fancy with the formatting, so long as it's readable. The biggest challenge I usually have is when is it appropriate to do a paragraph break?
How do you delineate between scenes or chapters or sections? Or do you?
Depends on how much time passes. If there's a scene transition to a new location with new people, or a significant time change of multiple hours or days or weeks, I'll usually put a line break through the page. There's kind of a lot of novels have them. There's some kind of weird line break right in the middle of the page that just differentiates, hey, stuff happens here, but it was boring, so I didn't write it. And the chapters, that's a good question. When do you end a chapter? I think we talked about that in a previous episode a long time ago.
Yeah, I think that was more in regards to the plot and style rather than pure formatting. Forget
Yeah.
which episode, though. But I know, at least for what I'm working on now at work, because I'm formatting a book, but that is nonfiction, I have to be very clear when chapters start and end, so consistency has been an interesting factor, because one thing why Google Docs is actually your friend in many endeavors is it tends to strip a lot of funky formatting I've noticed from Microsoft Word. If a lot of people are using Microsoft Word for different articles or sections and you copy and paste them all together, stripping that hidden code is nigh impossible.
Mm.
Even if you copy the text into a basic word editor like Text Wrangler or Notepad++, and then paste it back in, that code still exists. I don't understand how it still survives, but it does. And it's an adventure fixing it.
Have
But
you
I know,
tried you? I'm sorry. Have you tried using just straight Notepad instead of Notepad++ to strip out formatting?
no.
Try that. Notepad is your friend. Straight up regular vanilla Notepad is your friend.
There's also a hotkey that you hold when you hit Control V that pastes just the plain text and removes formatting. So you don't need to go back and forth between Notepad and something else. You'd have to look up what it is, but it's like Control Shift V or Control Alt V. One of those will strip all the formatting out.
Yeah, something like that. I tend to forget about that, though. And it only happens when I need to do bulleting or numbering lists that the formatting just goes insane. But I know for intricate books like that, where it's not necessarily all story, formatting is very important because I have to have specific font size for chapter titles and then section titles and just highlights and call out sections. So it's interesting to see how all that works. And it's very different from just novel writing. Novel writing is a lot more straightforward in regards to formatting. There aren't as many diagrams, usually. Unless you're writing a sci-fi book, maybe. And we lost Will. But yeah, there's a lot of different software options out there, but depending on what sort of novel you're writing, or short story, or flash fiction, or depending on the length, or regardless of the length, I should say, formatting is important because it helps you better scan through what you're writing to figure out where transitions are going to be, where chapter breaks are going to be, if there's going to be a time shift or a point of view shift. It's useful to delineate that somehow in a clear manner, so when you're editing it and when others are reading it, it's a little easier to parse. And I know if you're doing scripts, the main software that I've seen a lot of other writers use is primarily Final Draft, which has a minimal to medium learning curve from what I've heard. I have not had the patience to get around that learning curve personally, just because I have not really needed to play with script formatting that much until this month. So now I'm kind of regretting not learning that format. But I know there's also other software out there for script formatting. The main difference between novel and script formatting is script formatting definitely has a key style or template to delineate who is going to be speaking, if there's any active cues as to how they should be acting or tone of voice, if there's any interior or exterior scenery that they're interacting with or being affected by. All of that's notated differently in a script than how it would be in a novel. It's definitely a lot more bare bones, which is useful and makes a point for scripts because you don't really need back-end descriptions because it's all going to be shown visually. So it takes a slightly different mindset. And as Will wrote in the show notes in regards to poems, poems have no formatting. Just ask E. E. Cummings. While that's primarily true, even poems can have formats. Free flow poems, yes, have no format. They can be however you want it to be. It can be one word per line. It can be a jumble. It can be a giant block of text. It can be anything in between. But there are various formats like sonnets, haiku, which is one of my favorites, although I don't have the patience for it, or the skill. And then you can rhyme the poem, you cannot rhyme the poem. There's various rhyming schemes. Most of them are more traditional in style than what most modern poets use nowadays. I have fallen far out of the poet realm since college. I used to actually read a fair amount of them, but now I'm very out of touch. So I can't really speak much as to what modern poetic style may be. And I have rambled on long enough, hoping that Will might be able to pop on. So while we hopefully wait for him to return, does anyone else have their own commentary to add to this talkie point? Or shall I continue monologuing awkwardly?
I probably haven't written enough to justify me even being a part of this conversation, but what I can say what I can say is that I use basically one piece of software to do everything when it comes to writing, as long as it's not like website design and stuff like that. And that's just Scrivener. I've been using that since I got it 50% off after winning a Nano one year, and haven't gone back. I haven't formatted for publication using it. Supposedly it's okay, but it could be better. And for like reports and technical documents, I do most of it in Office, and then I make my own formatting header section, so I can choose which headers I want at which times, and then they sync up nicely with everything else. And then I'm trying to remember what's the piece of software that everyone uses to make smaller reports that has lots of charts and graphs. It's a programming language. Anyone know what I'm talking about?
When it comes to reports, I'm usually stuck with PowerPoint.
I can't remember. People that are listening are screaming right now because they all know what I'm talking about. And I don't remember. If it occurs to me, I'll pop in.
UML?
No, that might be the base language, but it's called something specific.
Well,
I'll come up with it.
yeah, you can look that up, but in the meantime, we actually have a viewer question that we can tack on to this discussion of what is the right and wrong way to transition between scenes. I would say, unfortunately, it's not an easy yes, like one-line answer for the question, but depends on the scene and just what the two connecting scenes are trying to convey. If there is a clear breaking point via time, that helps figure out, okay, there's a 5-hour time skip, I should find a way to transition here. Or if the main character of the scene has accomplished what they have meant to accomplish, or have been delayed in accomplishing what they want to accomplish, and they won't be able to properly accomplish it until later, that might be a good spot to transition between scenes. If you're switching locations, even if it's from like inside the house to outside, that can be a shift in scenes depending on how well they merge together. It's also partially just your own personal style, depending on how long you want your scenes to go and how you want them to flow back and forth. If your geography or time is all over the place, like there's a lot of time gaps or a lot of different locations, chances are your scenes are going to be relatively short as you keep moving from time and or place. If your story is more plot-based or character arc-based, it may be a little longer. Each scene may span a little more as you try and accomplish little story arc by little story arc from the character needs to do X, Y, and Z. How do they accomplish X, Y, and Z? What gets in the way? And how it progresses from point A to point B. At least that's how I've kind of always thought about it. At least off the top of my head. I'd have to give it a little more thought in regards to some of the other pieces I've been doing.
No, you've pretty much said what I was going to say on that topic.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. For those who are curious, LaTeX is the programming language that I was thinking of.
Kinky.
If you spell it with a capital T and a capital X, you should be okay.
I have no witty retort because I was trying to multitask and looked at a different comment. So you're safe this time. I get the impression that we're not getting Will back, which is a shame. Let's see. Other commentary. So nothing like, meanwhile in this scene, or world, date, time, location at the base of the line break. In a rough draft, that's perfectly acceptable for your own internal reference to keep track of what's happening when and where and all that information. In regards to a final draft or an ongoing draft that may be read by beta readers, you're going to want to integrate that type of information into the scene itself. And you're going to want to find something a little smoother in regards to a transition between meanwhile, back at the headquarters, blah de blah. I mean, if you're writing a comic book or a cartoon or semi-campy anime, that's perfectly acceptable because that's kind of one of the tropes. But if it's most other styles or genres, you're going to have to tweak it a little more. Or at least I've seen most readers tweak it to their own personal style.
One other exception I'll bring up is like if you're doing a first-person journal type of novel where your protagonist is actively writing in a journal, then you could actually use dates, times, and some keywords and make it a little fun that way.
Yes, that is actually a very good way of working around that to keep the information formatted that way. And you can also semi-tweak it so that it's still in the voice of whatever character is writing in that journal, because they're going to write the way they think and speak more or less. So any personal quirks that that character may have can be portrayed while giving that information.
What about in the event that you have like multiple primary characters that are going through like different things at the same time? Like I think like you can have like contrasting scenes that way as long as you have a scene that eventually ties everything together.
So would all of those characters be doing things simultaneously in the same geographic location, or different locations just at the same time? And we'd be bouncing back and forth.
It would be kind of open-ended. Like there, you could have characters in separate locations doing things at the same time. Characters in the same location, like, similar location at different like before or after. It all kind of depends on like kind of what you're going for as the story begins to progress. As long as you can tie everything together.
Hmm.
Right, I think tying it together is the important part, because you could have something like there's a caper going down, and you've got one guy on the roof and one guy on the ground, and you could write the story as in Jason walked through the front door an hour before Maria had radioed him on the roof, or after, whatever. But you could bounce it back and forth that way. Having a clock running that is important to the story. If the clock running is not really important, then I would probably recommend trying not have your characters doing the same thing or doing different things at the same time in different locations. You'd be surprised how often travel lengthens the time it takes for a character to do something. You may have the next thing this character is going to do, and then the next thing this other character is going to do are the next things. They don't actually have to happen on the same day, unless it's vitally important to your story that does happen. One character could do something on a Saturday, and one character could do something on a Sunday, and then they meet up, midweek. That's perfectly fine too. They don't necessarily have to be on the same day, both doing it on Saturday. And that kind of cleans the timeline a little bit and allows sort of zigzagging between the two timelines, but no backtracking.
Basically anything to avoid confusion on the part of the reader.
Right. Even time travel books and movies take great care in doing one of two things: either trying to make it not confusing, and thereby breaking most things that would actually happen during a go back in time situation. And in that case, they usually just tell you to ignore it. What was the time traveling movie with Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt? Looper. They did a great job where Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like talking to Bruce Willis and going, "Dude, I don't understand any of this time travel stuff." And then Bruce Willis was like, "Who cares?" And then they moved on to another scene. And I was like, "Oh, they're telling that to the watcher that it doesn't matter and it doesn't make sense. So just keep going with the flow and don't think about it too hard."
That's actually very clever, the way they did that.
Yeah, there's going to be inevitable paradoxes, and you as the watcher have to just have suspension of disbelief that won't happen. Much like, superhero movies, you think of them, there's some suspension of disbelief there. And time travel movies do have to have established rules, and those rules will usually be kept throughout the whole story. But things involving paradoxes are usually broken because it's very hard to deal with that kind of thing, especially when you have like a primer situation. I don't know if anyone's seen that movie, but that has a lot of duplicates going. So at one point, they brought a time machine into a second time machine, and
Because that always works well.
That complicated things greatly. And supposedly it all checks out, but I looked at the timeline map and it is exhausting. And so it's best not to really worry too much about that.
Yeah, most of the time.
Oh, go ahead.
Most of the time travel stuff that I'm familiar with is Doctor Who or Bill and Ted.
And a lot of the go back in time and, make sure you don't see yourself because then bad things happen. Bad things actually wouldn't happen. You would create, or you would be a part of a separate timeline where that thing was allowed to happen, but it makes the writing very confusing and it sort of breaks canon with the original storyline. So the whole, you can't see yourself when you go back in time. CJ, if you go back in time, you can definitely go check yourself out, and nothing really that bad will happen because you won't even be in that timeline anymore. Because in our current timeline, you don't exist as a duplicate in the past. But already it's making things confusing, so you usually try to avoid that so that you can return safely to the present time and not have to worry about that alternate timeline.
So what if I just kidnap like 19 of my past selves and we create our own little army in the future? What happens then?
You could easily do that. You would just be part of a timeline that's not part of the original timeline where none of that actually did happen.
We make our own new timeline.
Depending on how you think about it, all the timelines already exist in all manifestations, and every possible combination of molecules already exists.
Even in a universe where none of that is feasible?
I mean, it's all feasible.
Yeah, but the whole concept of a multiverse is that anything is possible, even in there's even a universe where that's not possible then.
No, that's not how that works out.
How do you know? Have you gone to all these universes?
I've gone to a few.
Now you should go see some more. Maybe you'll find the one where none of that is feasible. And then I'll prove you wrong.
I mean... Hey, Will's back!
I only had to completely reset my computer.
Jeez.
Because updates.
Oh, jeez.
I think it was doing update stuff in the background because when I reset it, it said preferring updates, and just now, as I was saying that I had to restart it, Windows 10 dinged at me and said updates complete.
Good times.
I'm back now.
But yes, before I forget what I wanted to say, like in cases of like stories with multiverses and like timelines and scenes that go back and forth, do you as a writer kind of rely on suspension of disbelief in the hopes that the reader will allow for that, and basically have them okay, let me start this over. I had it in my head. Like, as a writer, do you expect the reader to give you the benefit of suspension of disbelief with your story if you're doing like back and forth timelines or even going into multiverses, or do you just kind of take a shot in the dark and kind of hope for the best? Like, basically what I'm asking is suspension of disbelief expected as kind of a security blanket for you as a writer?
I would say it's more of a a stopgap measure in that you try to do your best in making the timelines make sense, and you write out your story that way. And as long as you follow a consistent set of rules, you're usually okay. But when you have a lot of like multi-layer timeline crossing, it can get messy, and people will, 9 out of 10 people won't really care, and they'll just go with the flow because it's a story, and that's what they're there for. But the 1 out of 10 people or the 1 out of 100 people who are obsessed about this kind of thing will draw out the timeline and will find places where you fucked up and then report about it on the internet.
Why do you think there's so many various theories about Back to the Future, Bill and Ted, every Doctor Who episode ever? Any time travel series of some sort is going to have people trying to break down the timeline or timelines and connect the dots.
And then you just pull a Terminator where you go back in time just a little bit further and erase everything that happened and start over.
I lost track of that series after, I think, the third movie.
I think they lost track of humanity as the group of writers and directors that produced those films after the third one.
Doesn't surprise me.
So it feels like you basically have two schools of thought. You have suspension of disbelief and, for lack of a better term, suspension of disbelief.
I think there's also limits as to how far you can suspend disbelief.
Calvin, are you going to make me write a time travel novel for Nano this year? Is that what this is turning into now? I might have to.
I'm definitely not going to stop you. If that's a thing you want to do, I will encourage it wholeheartedly.
Not particularly, but I don't really want to do anything ever. Gotta play Mario Maker, but we'll get to that.
I'd consider doing it, but I have trouble thinking in the fourth dimension.
That's why you skip the fourth dimension altogether and just go to the fifth.
I mean, that would be what the multiverse would be. It would be the fifth dimension, because you would have parallel running timelines. Anyways, so yeah, I'll write a time travel thing for Nano.
Sweet.
And it'll be mathematically sound, and then I'll fuck it up at some point, and then the reader will have to suspend their disbelief in how that paradox doesn't actually make sense.
Because wibbly wobbly timey wimey.
Precisely.
I'm sure Professor Farnsworth also had a good reason, but I can't think of what his line was now. Because they've done time travel before, a couple times round.
My favorite was when they could only go forward in time.
And they looped all the way around.
Yep. They went so far forward in time that they looped back to the beginning in the reset of the solar system.
Because why not?
Except, spoiler alert, it was, the new universe was like 2 feet below the original universe. So when the time travel machine showed up, it fell, or maybe it must have been like 8 feet, because then it fell and killed all of the crew from the original timeline instantly.
Oops.
Yep.
Well, it worked because it solved the problem of the same person existing twice in the same timeline.
Right. Like I said, either suspension of disbelief or avoid the situation entirely by killing all of the characters that would create a paradox.
Something else that Doctor Who tends to do a lot, because the universe is organic and sorts itself out when there is a paradox, usually with death.
And for time travel to work, you have to also kind of suspend your disbelief about most of the fundamental laws of thermodynamics.
Yeah, who pays attention to those anyway?
I do. I do.
All right, I think we've covered this topic at least as well as we're going to be able to tonight without a little bit of a deeper dive on some of the things we've wandered off onto. So I'm going to move us on to the weekly highlights reel, where we talk about various news and things that we've seen on the internet over the past week that kind of caught our attention. Which means I got to get to the right tab. They're out of order. Why are they out of order? And they're not loaded, just for good measure, because PDFs don't load, because they're silly. Okay. Getting there. And then we push the thing and do the whatnot. We actually have a relatively light highlights reel for this week. There's no new book bundles. And we've all been kind of busy coordinating for various creative endeavors and events and whatnot. So the main story that we have for this week is there is a pretty fascinating diagram of the integrated space plan, which basically covers an entire century or so of what the human race wants to do in regards to space exploration and travel. And they recently gave it a bit of a visual upgrade, which you're viewing now. It is incredibly dense because there is a lot of stuff that is going on currently and potentially in the future. And it's primarily meant for engineers and aeronautic people, not necessarily the general populace.
I've actually worked on a few of these modules.
Really?
Yep.
Nice.
Can't tell you which ones, but some of them.
Obviously was for human interstellar expansion.
Right, yeah, the stuff in 2020 is
Yeah.
most of the stuff I've worked on.
Okay. The nice thing about the update, not only is it's actually easier to parse than the original. We'll show you the original next, but they've color coded it, and each of these little boxes is actually a link to that project itself or to information about that project and endeavor. So if you're really curious about this, you can really do some deep dive learning in regards to some of these. And horizontally, it's chronological order all the way off into the far future. Vertically, you got propulsion systems, interplanetary expansion, robotic exploration, which I always find fascinating, even though I can never understand most of it. Regular research and development and emerging technologies, which is interesting / scary sometimes, depending on just what they're putting together and putting out. There's critical path support elements, which are a lot of stuff. That's this column and this one. Down the middle are the critical path endeavors, primarily International Space Station, an upgraded space station, various establishments on the moon and Mars and beyond. You also get just general infrastructure and transport from Earth to orbit in beyond. Now, if you think this one's a little tricky to parse and read through and look at all the stuff that's in there, the original one was created in 1989. This one I cannot really read. This one is very hard to look at. It makes me cringe. And I don't know how people can track every little arrow to figure out just what is related to what. So it's nice that they're giving it a bit of an upgrade and kind of tying it into the digital era so that you can actually look at every single little project that's going on, and I'm sure it'll be easier to update going forward as well. But I don't know, this one fascinates me. I like seeing this stuff and to a degree learning about it, because there's a pretty decent learning curve on some of these endeavors. I don't know about the rest of you, but
I did a count, and I've worked directly with about 15% of what's in the transport column.
no, I can't read that one right now. All right, so transport column, presumably up to relatively current timeline or near future.
Yeah, near future. There's some stuff there.
Not necessarily stuff in 2070.
There's stuff that I will definitely be working on when that time comes around, because I worked on some of the earlier stuff. There's some stuff that gets repeated, like there's a first flight of something, and then there's a supported flight. So anything after that, I would probably end up working on directly.
Cool.
So this is kind of neat to kind of see the big picture. It's very rare that I see the big picture. Usually I'm working on like a valve or something and not anything very important or big picture.
Still counts for something.
Yep, that oxygen and hydrogen need to get to the right place at the right ratios at the right time without exploding. And that's what I do.
Or else you'll set the schedule back by decades.
Oh, don't worry, the schedule's already been set back by decades. You see a design and then you analyze it and you're like, oh, this will be bad. And then they have to go and fix it before they can actually launch it in space.
And I would think this is also kind of an interesting resource for the sci-fi space opera writers out there that might want to do a space opera that's more near future, even if it's 100 years in the future.
Damn it, that's what I was going to do for Nando this year. Not to do a time travel thing. Ugh.
Into the near future.
Yes, time travel into the near future. One of the, not to derail you too much, but real quick, one of the writing one-liners I got super inspired by, one of the ones I wrote, obviously, and I wanted to write a whole novel around it because it was very near future type stuff where you can kind of see the future being actively built, but it takes so long that in your current generation you can basically see the generational shit being built in front of you, but you'll never be able to get on it because you'll be dead long before it's finished. And sort of how that generation of people are going to deal with it. I thought that would be a fun story. And maybe I could use this as sort of a timeline guide.
All right. Doing the math, realistically, I'm probably going to survive until about the 2060s or so, especially the way I live my life. It's kind of interesting to see just how much they potentially plan on accomplishing within a lifetime that I can actually appreciate it and see it as. Sorry, I got distracted.
No, I thought one of those boxes said tapeworm expansion.
I think that's one of the more secret projects they're working on.
Yeah, it's on the far right, just off screen.
Not sure they'd necessarily put that on the main timeline. It's one of the alternate timelines for the multiverse. And the links to both of these are in the show notes for episode 109 for Wood Ninjas Live over on fcwriters.com, because speaking out all the links for these is a little funky, but you can also just go to integratedspaceanalytics.com because they have all sorts of fascinating stuff in regards to space travel and whatnot. And the original one is also on integratedspaceanalytics.com, so you can see both the old and the new there. And
I think I might print these out and hang them at work.
Yeah, the original article that I read all this about from specified that like this original one was the equivalent of like a musical band poster for some engineers in college. They'd have this on the wall instead. Hopefully it would be a little more blown up and readable in regards to scale. I don't know. But I kind of prefer the color-coded one. And the last piece of news highlights is 2 out of 5 of us are still working with OTP Manga on some of their various endeavors, and they have 2 weeks left on their Indiegogo campaign. And as you can see, little short of their goal. Just the tiniest, littlest bit. But seeing as 2 of us here are participating in some of their endeavors, I thought I'd toss this on here just as a friendly reminder to at least look into them, see what some of their stuff is doing, some of the projects they're working on. Very few people I know right now have money to donate to anything, myself included, but sharing helps, Every chance to get it out there makes a difference.
Sharing is caring.
And hopefully they get to the level where they actually make some of these not sellable things, the giveaway items, because I wouldn't mind having some of these things myself, but it's not going to happen the way things are going, which is sad. But the link to that is also in the show notes for episode 109. So by all means, check them out, see some of the crazy shenanigans they're going to be up to. And those are really all the highlights we had for this week. Nothing else really jumped out at us, unfortunately. And we were all kind of crazy busy with work, life, work, convention.
Pre-conventions. Damn it.
Yeah, pre-convention stuff. So hopefully next week we have a few more things that we can toss on the show notes for you all. And as always, if our viewers and listeners happen to find anything of interest they would like us to talk about or highlight, by all means, send us a link or hit us up via social media so we can check it out. Next up, Productivity and Inspiration Station, where we get to talk about what we have been up to over the past week in regards to productivity, creativity, inspiration, etc. Let's see. First off, I survived a meeting with our Chief Financial Officer. And I think survived is the best word to go about it, considering
It was close.
on my budget.
Well, the past is in the past, and the future is in the future.
Not if you time travel.
If you bring too much money into the past, you'll actually crash the markets, and the dollar will be worth even less than what it would be if you were actually just there. So don't do that.
Fine.
And if it has a future date on it, then you will go to jail for fraud. So be careful. And also, if there's $2 bills with the same identification number on it, you are in trouble. Do not bring money into the past.
What about coins?
I don't know if coins have a... I don't think coins have a serial number, so that should be okay.
Or at least harder to differentiate.
Yes.
Although bringing future coins into the past is kind of stupid. It would be better to bring past coins into the future because past coins have higher metal or higher silver content and stuff like that than current ones. So
and
they would actually
worth
be more valuable.
Collectors.
Yeah.
Go back 100 years and get all the pennies you can.
That would make for an interesting short story. A time-traveling bank heist where all you get is just spare change from the past.
You just get rolls and rolls of wheatback pennies.
That would be interesting. But anyway, other stuff that I've been up to, all of the editing. So much editing and formatting. There's a book at work. There's a manga script that I'm reviewing. There's 2 game scripts that we're playing with that I'm trying to poke at when I get a free second or two. Theoretically, I have my own books that I need to poke at, but I have not. Plenty of editing to do. And also video editing. I didn't even think of that when I wrote that down, but I've been trying to edit some of our older episodes and interviews for certain other endeavors and trying to pull out sound clips for animated shorts and stuff like that. Mainly just of Justin freaking out or getting angry at me. For no reason whatsoever. Completely unjustified.
There are things we had to skip until the end. so that my boiling rage didn't leak out.
Sadly, none of that was recorded over the weekend. It might be for the best. But because of last weekend's meeting, I have also set my own personal budget and financial schedule for the rest of the year so that I can kind of accomplish and pull off some of the crazy, ridiculous things that we're trying to do for next year. Some for this, some for myself. But it's actually very nice to actually have a game plan now for the next 3 or 4 months and kind of see how that may work out. And since Will is still here, hey, what have you been up to this past week?
I'm still here. Yay. Over the past week, I finished the rough draft and completely typed up the next chapter for Roommate. All I have to do now is all of the editing for it. Probably after this weekend. So next week. Best to do it for next week. I also discovered I had a lot more recorded Bioshock 2 than I thought, which is good because I have to do the next week's episode before Friday. I won't be able to do it this weekend. It was nice to have a lot of extra footage on hand. And other than that, the this month's Not Suitable for Word Ninjas is up. Word Ninjas podcast is up. There's even a link for it in our show notes, where we all talk about wonderful things from our childhoods and try to figure out what CJ has missed out on.
You all talk about wonderful things from your childhood. I just keep on saying no.
It really does. That's mostly what it was. Hey guys, remember all this? Everyone, yes. CJ, no.
No. That's just my entire track. Just no.
No. Actually, a lot of it was, what the hell is that?
Yeah, there was that too.
CJ, you ever have a slush puppy? What the hell
is that?
You've never had a slush puppy? Seriously, what the hell is that? Also give me some ideas editing it for how we should properly plan out seating arrangements the next time we record audio while all sitting in a hotel room.
We'll figure that out one of these days.
If it wasn't for the fact that we basically had to do it all in a hallway because the bed took up most of the room and the layout of that particular room was awful in that the bathroom was in the middle of the hotel room, it probably would have been a little bit easier.
Well,
lighting
all
is
we really need to know. This is just audio. Just audio. This was from Kineticon.
Kevin, we need giant stage lights so that we can put them up in the hotel for adequate lighting that's not on the table.
I have them. They're pretty old, but I have them. I brought them to the first convention we ever did, and then we didn't use them. Along with our green screen.
Well, if we can figure out a use for them before Friday, hey, why not bring them?
I can just toss it all in the trunk. I got space.
Am I being picked up?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just needed to. I was thinking audio, and mostly proximity to the audio recorder.
Basically, I need to eat the mic, and everyone else needs to be relatively close.
Actually, you were fine. Calvin and Justin need to eat the mic.
I think they were farther away. I think I was purposefully close in that example.
We'll figure it all out next time.
I think me and Justin were like right behind the mic, like right in the mic's blind spot or deaf spot or however you want to call it.
Right, we'd probably need to turn on a 4-track crossover audio recording and then do some fancy mixing to get the people behind the mic up without making everybody else go up even higher.
I was thinking we all get lapel mics.
Lapel mics are very dangerous. If you move at all, it will pick up your shirt rustling.
I'm not allowed one then.
You have
Don't
to
wear a
basically
shirt.
sit entirely still and never move.
And take it off before you go to the bathroom.
Yes.
Please. Yes.
We don't need that footage. That's pretty much all I did this past week.
What has Justin been up to this past week?
Oh, I've just been playing, a video game that came out on the Wii U very recently. I mean, no one's probably interested in hearing about how I've been making Super Mario Maker levels. I've been doing that a lot. I've been inspired. I watched some videos on some original level design techniques, and having played through the entire generation of Mario games, I thought that I had what it took. And the Miiverse has agreed with me. I have gotten many stars on my levels already, and I have gotten lots of comments like, wow, this actually feels like a real Mario level, because most of the Mario levels that people are making are just a bunch of shit everywhere for no reason, and there's no actual level design. It's like, what if we put 10,000 Koopa troopers in a row, and you had to jump on all of them to get to the flag? Not really in the vein of the original Super Mario Brother levels. So I will pimp them eventually, but I want to work on my first full world first, and then I will give the level codes for all four. And then you can basically, what you do is you take my levels and you save them in the level slots in the right order. And then a play button will come up, and you can play all four of my levels with extra lives that actually go from one level to another, so they're not independent levels anymore, which is pretty cool.
And as I've tried your World 1-1, I will need the extra lives.
You are very bad at video games, it turns out, especially old school platformers where the physics are a little bit different.
Says the one who also had trouble with the 100 Mario challenge.
That level is stupid. And I did after you left, by the way.
Okay.
But it was stupid.
Yes. Some of those were just complicated for the sake of being complicated.
Right.
Although now I want to see players like JonTron or some of the other ones out there try those levels, see how they fare.
You probably won't. Nintendo is not Let's Play friendly.
Yeah, which is a shame. But hopefully
Yeah.
they at least try them themselves, even if they don't record it. Because I feel they would appreciate it. Or get enraged by it.
In other news, I have set up my own personal Academy of Excellence. I have a long road ahead of me for the next 2 years, and I will be very, very, very busy. I probably won't have time to make Super Mario Maker levels for very much longer, based on the rigorous, painful schedule that I set myself up for. And it's all voluntary, and there's no actual deadline. But I'm sure as hell going to try, and I set up basically the entire schedule and curriculum in Asana so that I would get reminders about deadlines and due dates constantly. So yeah, we'll see if I keep going with that. Again, the aforementioned meeting with CJ. We talked about business stuff and financial stuff. There will be more of that on the horizon another time. And I also found out today, I was looking, I got a call from the secretary at work, and she's like, oh wow, you really went over the amount of hours you're supposed to take on this project. And I'm like, what? I've only worked 3 days on it. So I didn't think anything of it, and then I just kept getting hounded. And I'm like, I haven't done anything. So I go look up the project that I'm working on, and the project that I'm working on has not been authorized. And I've been putting those hours against a project that was long since completed.
Oops.
And I did this not, it was more of a managerial screw up where somebody was told to work on it because we didn't have a whole lot else to do. And then it turned out we got really busy again, and I still worked on this thing, and somebody else worked on it. And it's all totally worthless because we were never turned on to do it, and our customer's not interested.
Lovely.
So, if in the future they are interested and they want, then we will do a whole bunch of work and make lots of money off that job because it's already done. And
And he disappeared mid-word.
And he's gone.
Not the only one.
I'm gonna guess he hit the wrong button. And now he hit the right button. And now he's back.
I hit the wrong button. But anyways, I was just going to make a joke that the other thing I've been doing was Mario Maker, but now that joke is dead because I signed off by accident.
In that case, onwards to Calvin. What have you been up to this past week?
I had the hardest time trying to figure out what I did this week because I have been unable to brain for some reason. But two things I do remember that I did was I took the 5-hour driving course that I need to sign up for the road test to try to get my license. So that's a thing that I did. That was pretty cool.
Nice.
And the other thing that I remember doing is, holy crap, I went to the gym.
What?
I made it to the gym. And now everything below my chest hurts really bad. Walking was a fun time today. Even though I had a very delayed reaction from my body. I went to the gym on Tuesday. I felt no soreness yesterday. But the soreness hit right when I was getting ready to leave for work this morning. And has lasted the entire day.
Well, that's not fair.
But no pain, no gain, or whatever that stupid phrase is, or however you say it. So, yeah. Gym. I did it.
Yay.
And be perfectly honest with you, I should be really, really ashamed of myself. I'm not going to tell you how close this gym is from my house. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in a podcast a couple of years ago, but it's very close to my house, and I don't know. It took so long for this gym to open that my interest in going to this gym died once it finally, by the time it finally opened. So, I don't know. I was inspired to get to the gym primarily because of a comment my cousin made when he saw me and saw how much weight I lost. And that just encouragement always helps. So I decided to just get off my butt, stop with all the coding that I've been doing lately, and just take some time and go to the gym. And it was definitely worth it, even though everything hurts right now. And it's going to make for very interesting times if I don't stop hurting by the time I leave for Hartford.
You'll hurt even more tomorrow, and then it will go away.
That's good to know.
And then you'll hurt for entirely different reasons because convention.
Interestingly enough, I don't get con pains too terribly bad, but just get con tiredness generally.
I think we all get that. Conventions are exhausting.
Very much so. Eesh. But yeah, that's been my week, at least what I can remember of it.
And speaking of conventions, there's one this weekend. We are all going to Hartford Comic Con in Hartford, Connecticut. We will be exhibitors there, which is why we are not on the main website, because exhibitors are not displayed. But if you go to the maps page, you will find us under table W1, which is off in the middle area and then off to the side in a semi-corner next to some doors of some sort. So if you are able to attend, look for the table that has a typewriter and little ninja cubes staring at you judgingly to be creative, and you'll find us. All 5 of us will be there as well. And we have a press badge, so there will be recorded shenanigans. And that is also the last convention we are scheduled for this year. If you want to check us out next year, we're already confirmed for Euraminicon and Kineticon. Euraminicon is January in Meriden, Connecticut. Kineticon is July in Hartford, Connecticut for next year. And we have 2 or 3 more that are far enough on the horizon that we can't really confirm anything about yet, and probably not for several months. But as always, once we get anything new in regards to information, we'll toss it up there for everyone to know about. So if you want to meet us in person, that's your best bet. And with that, hey, it's a show. That's all we got. As always, if we have entertained you in any way, shape, or form over the last hour or so, kind of a short episode, check us out on YouTube, where we have the entire backlog of episodes, all 108 previous episodes, except for one that YouTube ate, and we can never get back, which is sad. We also have our full series of Game Break Let's Play episodes, all sorts of convention and event shenanigans, and a few other videos of stuff we get up to. Check them out. Watch them, comment, thumbs up, give us ideas for other shenanigans we can get up to. If you want to talk to us via social media, we're over on Twitter at FCWordNinja, over on Tumblr, fcwordninja.tumblr.com, and over on Facebook, facebook.com/fullcoveragewriters. And if you can't make it to any of the conventions that we're at, for whatever reason, you can still get our shiny baubles. All of the shiny baubles are over on our Etsy store, etsy.com/shop/fullcoveragewriters, where you can get all sorts of creative buttons or magnets, bookmarks, books on the art of writing or how to warp time to be creative. We have our little Ninja Cube writer blocks, and more. Go check them out. If you want to track me down, your best bet at the moment is still my Tumblr page, fancypantswolf.tumblr.com. Where can people track down Will?
Mostly you can find me on my Tumblr page at darkhom.tumblr.com. That's spelled DARKHOM.tumblr.com. You can also check out updates on My Roommate's a Stripper at myroommatesastripper.tumblr.com. And support me on my Patreon at patreon.com/darkhom.
And where can people find Justin?
As always, for now, you can find just about everything that I do on mechanicaljustin.com. And soon, all the Mario Maker levels that I've been making will be posted there, so keep an eye on that for those hot codes.
And how about Calvin?
Let's see. You can find me on Tumblr at instacal.tumblr.com. You can find me at CCWII on Twitter and Instagram. I still kind of keep up with those, kind of, sort of. Instagram more than anything. Twitter, not so much these days. I'm working on it.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that we need to create a collective Instagram account but all the stuff that I tend to photograph in regards to conventions and stuff just get tossed onto mine. So if you want to see convention shenanigans and other shenanigans that I get up to, Silverwolf85 for Instagram. Because I know for Kineticon and Inconceivable, I was trying to be diligent about that. And all the other various links for all of us are in the About Us page over on fcwriters.com. If you want to track us down via one of the less used methods, by all means. And with that, that's a show. Thank you all for joining us for episode 109 of Word Ninjas Live. Tune in next week for episode 110, where we'll be doing a review of Hartford Comic Con. And who knows what else we'll be getting up to, because we don't really have a backlog of talkie points anymore. We've talked through them all. So if there's something you would like us to talk about, or look into, or do a deeper dive on, let us know. Send us an email. Hit us up on social media. Give us questions. Make us think. But until then, go be creative. Go have some fun. Go to a convention. And we'll see you all next week. We wait, and we go live. Greetings and salutations, viewers and listeners. Welcome to episode 109 of Word Ninjas Live. I am your regular host, Charles, coming to you tonight with our co-hosts, Will.
Hello.
Justin.
Hello.
And Calvin.
Hello. I was trying to come up with something witty. I couldn't. I can't really. I've been having trouble coming up with much of anything this week.
That's what this weekend is for. We can refresh our creative juices.
Something to that extent.
Preferably in a PG-13 manner, though.
No promises.
All right, tonight we are coming to you with, that's not my show notes, that's a map. Where are my show notes? There are my show notes. Coming to you tonight with a talkie point about formatting, because not everyone necessarily writes non-fiction novels, or fiction novels, or both. I don't know. Let's see. What resources are there for content formatting, and what formatting have you used in your creative works? Primarily, we're talking about novels, scripts, screenplays, poems, mostly literary works, but we can adapt it as necessary, as can our viewers and listeners for their respective creative endeavors. This was a question brought up a good while ago now. It was in the queue, but mainly trying to focus on what sort of software is out there for formatting novels, or formatting a script, or basically what formats are expected for certain literary endeavors. I know we kind of broke it down primarily into novel-length pieces, poetry, and then scripts. Those seem to be the three primary ways you can break stuff down, and novels can be changed into different lengths from novel to, unless you're writing a sci-fi book maybe. And we lost Will. Yeah, there's a lot of different software options out there, but depending on what sort of novel you're writing, or short story, or flash fiction, or depending on the length, or regardless of the length, I should say, formatting is important because it helps you better scan through what you're writing to figure out where transitions are going to be, where chapter breaks are going to be, if there's going to be a time shift or a point of view shift. It's useful to delineate that somehow in a clear manner, so when you're editing it and when others are reading it, it's a little easier to parse. And I know if you're doing scripts, the main software that I've seen a lot of other writers use is primarily Final Draft, which has a minimal to medium learning curve from what I've heard. I have not had the patience to get around that learning curve personally, just because I have not really needed to play with script formatting that much until this month. So now I'm kind of regretting not learning that format. But I know there's also other software out there for script formatting. The main difference between novel and script formatting is script formatting definitely has a key style or template to delineate who is going to be speaking, if there's any active cues as to how they should be acting or tone of voice, if there's any interior or exterior scenery that they're interacting with or being affected by. All that's notated differently in a script than how it would be in a novel. It's definitely a lot more bare bones, which is useful and makes a point for scripts because you don't really need back-end descriptions because it's all going to be shown visually. So it takes a slightly different mindset. Because I'm formatting a book, but that is nonfiction, I have to be very clear when chapters start and end, so consistency has been an interesting factor, because one thing why Google Docs is actually your friend in many endeavors is it tends to strip a lot of funky formatting I've noticed from Microsoft Word. If a lot of people are using Microsoft Word for different articles or sections and you copy and paste them all together, stripping that hidden code is nigh impossible.
Mm.
Even if you copy the text into a basic word editor like Text Wrangler or Notepad++, and then paste it back in, that code still exists. I don't understand how it still survives, but it does. And it's an adventure fixing it. But
Have you
I know,
tried I'm sorry. Have you tried using just straight Notepad instead of Notepad++ to strip out formatting?
no.
Try that. Notepad is your friend. Straight up regular vanilla Notepad is your friend.
There's also a hotkey that you hold when you hit Control V that pastes just the plain text and removes formatting. So you don't need to go back and forth between Notepad and something else. You'd have to look up what it is, but it's like Control Shift V or Control Alt V. One of those will strip all the formatting out.
Yeah, something like that. I tend to forget about that, though. And it only happens when I need to do bulleting or numbering lists that the formatting just goes insane. But I know for intricate books like that, where it's not necessarily all story, formatting is very important because I have to have specific font size for chapter titles and then section titles and just highlights and call out sections. So it's interesting to see how all that works. And it's very different from just novel writing. Novel writing is a lot more straightforward in regards to formatting. There aren't as many diagrams, usually. Novelette to short story to flash fiction and everything in between. But scripts can also count for TV, movie, stage, video game, because hey, that's a thing, and even we're working on that. Manga, because that's also a thing some of us are working on, and there are scripts involved. And anything else that we come up with. Now, most people who are going to be working on these, chances are going to be using hardware of some sort, usually a computer or laptop, maybe a tablet or phone, depending on where you need to be working on this. But the main stuff that I tend to use is Microsoft Office, just because it's so prevalent and the file formats are so widely used across the industry. Yes, there are free software options out there, like I want to say OpenOffice. There's others that I'm blanking on now, even though I've used them, that you can transfer into Microsoft Word template or file formats. And then there's stuff like Text Wrangler or Notepad Double Plus, just for basic text writing, but still you're going to want to format it into something a little more widely used and acknowledged at some point. If you're sharing it across multiple people, like, hey, what we do, Google Docs is your friend. Stuff like Evernote is hit or miss depending on how active multiple people need to be in regards to editing at the same time. We've learned that the hard way. And those are the main ones that came to the top of my head. I'm curious if anyone else has others they would like to toss in regards to like what software they would use for writing a novel or formatting a novel or lengthy piece, as it were. Or am I just going to get silent stares?
I've mostly been using Google Docs to do all my writing in lately. I don't really have any super fancy formatting that I use for it. Standard half-inch indents, single space, inch borders on the side.
Everything in Comic Sans.
Oh God, no. I think Roommate is in Times New Roman, but I think Google Docs defaults to Arial. So if I start something new, it'll be in Arial, but I started writing Roommate in Microsoft Word, which defaulted, I don't know if it still does, but it used to default to Times New Roman. And then when I imported it over, it kept that formatting. But other than that, I'm not super fancy with the formatting, so long as it's readable. The biggest challenge I usually have is when is it appropriate to do a paragraph break?
How do you delineate between scenes or chapters or sections? Or do you?
Depends on how much time passes. If there's a scene transition to a new location with new people, or a significant time change of multiple hours or days or weeks, I'll usually put a line break through the page. There's kind of a lot of novels have them. There's some kind of weird line break right in the middle of the page that just differentiates, hey, stuff happens here, but it was boring, so I didn't write it. And the chapters, that's a good question. When do you end a chapter? I think we talked about that in a previous episode a long time ago.
Yeah, I think that was more in regards to the plot and style rather than pure formatting. Forget
Yeah.
which episode, though. But I know, at least for what I'm working on now at work,